past, hopping down, cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
My message to any dad, man, first off, know that, yeah, it is a hard job, but it's the greatest job in the world. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't change anything about it. Everything you're doing from here on out, if it didn't have purpose before, now it has purpose. It's the most important thing you'll ever do. Just be a dad.
Welcome to another episode of Dad is Not a Noun. My name is Ishmael, changing the narrative for men of color fatherhood, as well as changing the narrative on the things I care about. And what's going on in the media right now and in our society, right now they're talking conversation of ICE. And I'm truly honored to have this brother on with me. But before I have the brother take the floor, what comes to mind, I think of George Carlin. George Carlin was this amazing comedian. Like he was ahead of his time when he was talking about politics. And the one thing he brought up in one of his comedy stands was the difference between privilege and rights. When it comes to privileges, those can be taken away. If you talk about how the Japanese in internment camps, how Italians were treated, as well as Black people were treated. And you have rights. Rights is something you continually fight for. It is something that is not given, you take, and you continually fight. And this is something you lay the groundwork for your children to keep on fighting. And so we're going to have this conversation through the Black lens when it comes to ICE and how what's going on with the situation with document people, and I'm going to call them document because the only way ICE is able to find um, the people that they're kidnapping is they're documented. How are you going to to find their kids in school, work? So there's documentation to show that they're here and they were here legally. And I don't want to separate the two with American citizens because I know we talked about it earlier. When you take due process from one group, you're taking away from everybody else. And I'm honored to have this brother back on with me again. This guy's wearing many hats. I'm gonna let him reintroduce himself. Dontaye Carter, thank you for coming on, brother.
Ishmael, man, I appreciate you having me, man. I really do. I appreciate your platform. We got to continue to do more of what you're doing because it's only through what you're doing that we can really add context to this conversation. So, my brother, thank you so much for all that you've done and continue to do.
No, I appreciate you for coming on, man, because this was like last minute. I hit you up on the text. I'm like, yo, we need to talk about this because through like just as Black men, this is things that we have to have this conversation on because understanding history, knowing our struggle, you can't tell the American story without the Black story in America.
Yeah, facts.
With any other minority group, you cannot tell the American story without the Black struggle. Every other minority group benefited from the Black struggle. So I'm going to leave it right there. The question I'm going to ask you, because, I'm all about mental health. How's your heart at this moment?
Say that again for me. I'm sorry.
Oh, the question I'm going to ask you, because I'm all about mental health.
Yeah.
How's your heart at this moment?
Man, my heart is heavy. It's heavy because, I live in one of the most diverse places in Georgia. We got people here from over 120 other countries. My daughter goes to school with every group of a child, everything from everybody from Mexican to Palestinian to Nigerian. They're all there, right? Jewish, Israeli, everybody's there, and so it's difficult because in this moment, even when people can't see our humanity, there's an obligation for us to fight for it because we know that if anybody loses due process, everybody loses due process, and we have to ensure that that our children got a future here, and that's why I continue to be vocal, continue to stand up, fight, and make sure that we're lifting up all voices.
And I think that's important. And I just want to thank you for running that strong campaign. You ran, if you want to just talk about that a little bit,
Yeah,
what you learn from
you know,
it,
man,
and
it's so crazy because I met a I ran against a guy that's been in office for close to 50 years. 50 years. So, it was interesting. There were four people that got in the race. I was the only true progressive in the race. And like we anticipated, it came down to me and MAGA light. I don't want to say MAGA like, but MAGA light. And it's bananas, but we nearly tripled turnout for African Americans in the city, Hispanics, Asians, and it was beautiful to see. I had one of the young professionals hit me up, just graduated college and working in the city. And he said, "Man, I had never seen so many Black and Spanish people lining up at the polls." And I told a lot of folks, and I was honest about this. I was in a runoff because Black and Hispanics got up and voted, and we knew the numbers were there. We knew we just had to turn people out, and they came out to vote. The runoff was tough, man. We live in a city where Warnock and Ossoff, or not city, but a state, I'm sorry, Warnock and Ossoff won. And they understood that these individuals, these elected officials, won in runoffs, and they had to change the game. And so, what used to be 9 weeks of runoff campaigning went down to 28 days. And so I had 28 days to do again what I had been doing for 11 months, and working to turn out the Black, Latino, and Asian vote. And we just ran out of time, and that was the hardest part, is knowing that the numbers were there. It went from 2 weeks of early vote to 4 days. Those 4 days happened during the week of Thanksgiving. We know many of our voters are working people with young families, and so whenever you condense time like that and people don't have the time to turn back out, it impacts. And so that was the hardest part, because when we got out and we talked to people, we saw that there was a real heart to get out and vote. There was a real heart for change, but it was tough to really replicate what we had did in the election with just, again, 28 days, less than a month, to get that vote back out. But man, it was interesting. We were out and we held a candlelight vigil for Renee Good yesterday here in Sandy Springs, and one of the older ladies came up to me and she said, "Man, I tell you one thing." She was like, "You may not have had the numbers in the runoff to beat the incumbent, but," she said, "ain't nobody else in this city gonna be able to beat you." Um, but what made me laugh about it is none of that was possible without people that look like me coming out to vote.
mm,
And that's what inspired me the most, because folks looked around and they saw themselves and they were like, "Man, we could actually win this." This is a city that for 50 years, they were trying to make this become a city prior to this city's establishment, 50 years. Now, if you look at the dates on that, and you subtract 50 years from when the city was incorporated, you know
yeah,
what I'm talking about. And
yeah,
so, they try to say this wasn't a white flight city, but again, if you do the math and you understand the time period at which they started working to found this city, you know exactly what we're up against. And so, and that's why, I continue to speak out, continue to educate, continue to let people know, like, hey, you guys, this is on us. And that's why I appreciate you talking about how we have to fight for rights. That's something that Coretta Scott King said. It's on every generation to fight for their rights. Every generation. And it breaks my heart to see what's happening right now. To see when good people stand up non-violently, peacefully, they're assertive, but they're peaceful. And just the
right,
fact that they dare to assert themselves, the system deems it to be a threat. And so it's on us to have active compassion. It's on us to spread active peace. It's on us
right,
to remind these folks that there's still a U.S. Constitution. It still grants us the right to assemble peacefully. It grants us the right to tell the government to F off when they step out of line. It still grants us the right to make sure that our presence is felt. We're not doing anything that they did on January 6th. We
yeah,
ain't stormed our Capitol. We ain't smeared feces on any walls. We ain't broken any glass. We ain't attacked officers. We didn't put, they want to say they didn't kill any officers that day, but let me say this. We didn't put any officer in such fear of his life that he had a heart attack, right? We ain't done any of that. but we do have to assert ourselves, because if we don't, and a good friend of mine, Attorney Gerald Griggs, always says it, listen, if they take your vote, they will take your voice. And once they take your voice, they will kill you and justify it.
Mhm.
And that's what we're seeing right now. We got to make sure that they don't take our voice, they don't take our vote, and we continue to make our presence felt.
And that goes back to my next thing is when you take people voices, right? You
Hmm.
you you label document workers as undocumented. To me, that's a dog whistle, right? Because
Hmm.
again, you're saying that they didn't follow the steps of being here.
Yeah.
And so what happens is we separate them from us.
Yeah.
And so when we see stuff on video of them separating, like rating it into schools, they're going into businesses, they're going into homes and things like that, it sets up this lack of empathy for a certain group because we label them a certain term. And
Yeah.
again, we knowing our history, like this is no different than like this is basically the Fugitive Slave Act in real time.
Yeah. Well, I it's so crazy, man. I've been on this historical journey of really trying to find myself, and not just find myself for the sake of me, but being able to add context to my life. And so I didn't even realize it. And I was telling my sister the other day that had I known these things, there were so many questions I would have asked my great aunt B. Because my great great not my great great, I'm sorry, my grandmother was born in a house with her grandfather who was born a slave in this country. So a lot of people say, man, this is the way, way past. And no, it's not the way, way past. And I'm like, I was just telling my sister, I was like, man, had I didn't fully understand that. Like what were the conversations, what were the lessons that he taught her about how to survive in this country, right? He was born enslaved in this country. And it was crazy because when I found that information out, I was like, I want to go to where he was born, and it was the Phillips Plantation, which is now Grand Valley, Alabama. When I took my daughter there last year, right around Christmas, day after Christmas, there was no plaque or anything. So I made a whole video talking about it. We went back, God put it on my heart on Christmas Eve. And so my wife was working. So I, packed my daughter up. We went out there, and there was a plaque from the Alabama Historical Commission that talks about the plantation being there, how the city was founded, all these things. And I say all that because as I've started to dig and understand the history of how we even became enslaved here, my ancestry on my father's side goes back to Portugal prior to the transatlantic slave trade. Anybody that understands the history knows there were Moors there. There were groups of people from across Africa that came there because Portugal and Spain were under the rulership of the Moors at the time. And so if you looked like them, you had protection with them,
Yeah.
right? So they all went to where they were protected. But in the course of this history, you have the Catholic Crusades, you got the Moors, and they're fighting, right? Well, the Moors end up losing this war. And the first thing that the new kings decide to do is we got to start deporting these people, right?
Yeah.
So they start having mass deportations. Those mass deportations turned into what? The transatlantic slave trade. They never were taking these people back to their homelands, which is what they crouched the language in it. We're going to take them back to them. They never took them back to their homelands. They
Yeah.
took them to be workers in this new country that they had just
Mhm.
stolen. And we're seeing that same thing right now. They're not, these folks there that they're snatching about this, they're not taking these folks back to where they're from. They're taking them to what? They call them prisons in
Yep.
different places where they have contracts in different countries. What are those prisons? Those are plantations, those are concentration camps. We got to be honest about the language that's being used here and really being one step ahead of them. And hey, what are y'all doing? And the fact that they're doing this under the guise of ignoring due process, y'all, like that's the part that bothers me. Is like, and another thing that we got to be honest about, right? the level of force that's being used for a civil infraction.
Yeah.
It's not criminal to come into this country illegally. It's civil. It is a fine. Here's your fine. Go home. That's the
Yep.
process. You
Yep.
go before a judge. The judge deems that you came into this country illegally, give
Mhm.
you your fine, and say you go home. That's not what's happening right now. And that's the part that scares me the most.
And what I think is like it's intentional because it's only happening to states like you got Minnesota, you got Oregon, California, New York, a little bit with Pennsylvania. When I'm not talking about Pennsylvania as a whole, I'm talking about
Yeah.
like Philadelphia. When you talk
Yeah.
about that, like it's intentionally designed for those areas.
Yeah. Well, so ICE has jurisdiction. I believe it's about 50 miles from the coast. So which is where most major cities are, right? Because of the access to what? To the ocean, right? For
Right.
travel, for commerce, all these things, right? So that's typically their jurisdictional lines, which is bananas though, is because, and this was one of the things that I was speaking about on my run for mayor, is the fact that if you look at the Constitution, whether it's the federal Constitution, the state Constitution, or your city constitution, which they typically call charters, right? If you look at those, the mayors have the jurisdiction to say, hey, get out of here. So everybody got mad when the Minneapolis mayor was like, hey, man, y'all need to get the F out of here, right? Mayor Frey. But the reality is he is within his legal authority to tell him to bounce. Like
Yeah.
he is within that legal authority. And so my frustration is, why aren't more mayors who have the executive authority to say it's time for ICE to bounce out of my city, telling ICE to leave? Because we know what they're doing. There's no secret to what's happening right now. Everybody can see it. When you and I were talking off camera about the 32 individuals that have been killed by ICE, I want to remind y'all, immigration is a civil infraction. It's not criminal. Why do we have such great lethal force? These folks aren't part of the cartel. These folks aren't part of this big international gang. And let's be honest, a majority of these folks, right? Majority of these ICE agents aren't going after anybody connected to the cartel or any of these big international gangs. Let's be honest. They're going after children. They're going after folks. And another thing I want to add real quick, in Georgia, right? And I think it was back in the early 2000s, a majority of the Hispanics that are here came here on working visas, right? Because they were
Mhm.
working the fields out in rural Georgia. And I used to be a reporter down in Valdosta, and we were covering stories on it. And I remember just being in awe talking to this farmer, and she was just like, I need the Mexicans to come here and work my farm. The blacks won't do it anymore. The blacks, and the way she added the blacks, the Mexicans, I'm just
Mhm.
like, man, it was like walking back in time. But a
Right.
lot of these folks came here on working visas. That's
Yeah.
where they came here. And so to act like there's this mass migration of these underground tunnels and folks sneaking in, no, it was so funny. I saw a meme by one of the comedians, and he was just talking about how, man, ain't nobody, scaling the walls and climbing over. Man, we flying in, and it's true. Like they
No, he's
had
right.
visas to come here. So let's just be honest about this conversation, and really pushing back on this narrative that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our houses. A lot of them, very much like our own ancestors, work jobs that nobody else in this country wanted to work, and that's
Right.
part of this conversation that's being missed right now. And what's happening is the migration of us up the economic ladder, right? Minorities, people of color, is the greatest threat. And what really resonated on me, and I know I'm going on, so I apologize, but
No,
what
keep
really
going
hit
on,
me,
man. You
what
speaking, man. You cooking. You
I
cooking.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
bro.
But what really hit me is realizing when I was looking at the numbers, they said in 25 years, this would be a majority minority country in 25 years, right? What dawned on me is I was like, dang, my daughter will be 32 years old in 25 years. The last thing I want to see is us turn into South Africa,
Right.
where we have people of color who make up a majority of the population, right? But they don't have the rights to govern their own lives. And that for me is such a fear. And we got to just be honest, especially us, Black people, brown people, right? Indigenous people, understanding that, if we don't continue to fight, because listen, I used to work in Oklahoma, right? I was a reporter out there. I used to go out to the Indian reservations, and my heart broke. This was the first time when I moved out there, saw like a real native-looking Native American, right?
Right. Not
Most
the one from
times we see,
Thanksgiving or New York,
yeah,
the New York parade. Yeah.
and so it was difficult because some of the reservations, some have made a lot of money off casinos. Others
Right.
are still struggling. And so this facade that even with their reparations, they were made whole, there are some of them that are people talk about us being, many people in our community being strung out on drugs and using these as a coping mechanism. It's the same over there. And so I think that many of us don't understand the interconnectivity of the oppressed humanity and how if we
Mhm.
don't figure out how to work together and figure out how to stay on one accord so that we can lift from the bottom, man, it's going to be a long haul, bro. It's going to be a real long haul for a lot of folks.
No, 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 definitely. And the reason why I brought that up, this is an image of the people, human beings that were unalive, being in custody of of
Mm,
ICE.
yeah.
And so, sometimes it's important to put faces to stories. I will put the link in the description below. There's so many names. Um, but yeah, I think it's so valid to not separate the two
Yeah.
because their story is our story.
Yeah.
Um, and eventually, what happens to them is going to happen to us. And we see it right now with Renee Goodman as well as the gentleman Keith Porter Jr., who was
Yeah.
unalived by an off-duty ICE agent. The ICE agent was off the clock. You know what I mean? So I want people to understand that this affects everybody across the board. There's no separation between the two when it comes to citizen. And again, I'm gonna use the word document workers. Again,
Yeah.
document. They are documented. How are ICE able to find them? Because they're documented. You can't
They
get
had
a
migrant
job
visas.
without
Yeah.
documentation.
Yeah. They had migrant visas, bro. Like to your point, they're on paper. We can argue this. We can go back and forth. They can say whatever they want to, but to your point, the fact that we had two documented U.S. citizens die at the hands of ICE when it is illegal for ICE to engage U.S. citizens. You know what I'm saying? Like, when does the accountability part take in? And not
Yeah.
only that, if you go back and you read through the standard operating procedures of ICE and any other federal agent, it says that you cannot use deadly force to stop somebody from escaping. It
Yeah.
is illegal for ICE to shoot somebody for leaving a scene. And so folks keep coming up in here with all this, what about? Both people were wrong. Listen, it's only one person that died that day.
Right.
One. And she was well within her right to leave. And I think this is where people as a whole have to start holding the system accountable. Because had an attorney not sent me that standard operating procedures information and said, look at rule number 1, and it says you can't use deadly force to stop somebody from escaping. Like, it
Right.
doesn't say leaving. It says if they are escaping, you can't pull out your gun and shoot at them.
Right.
What did he do?
He pulled out his gun. And yeah, it, and people are having a debate about it, and it's again, I know we fall into this line where no matter what happened, we can watch a video, we can dissect it. People already, when they already have this bias in their head, they're gonna find ways to say it was justified, regardless of the fact. Like, you're not gonna change people's mind. This is who they are. This is
Yeah.
what they think, and you're not gonna change it. But I think it's important that we have to have this this important conversation on
Yeah.
how does this impacts our future, because like you were saying, that it's crazy that no matter what policies they put in place, America America is going to go back to before it was pre-colonized. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to be imminent. You're not going to change it.
Well, and I think so. We got one or two options here, right? We either hold this system accountable through how we vote, or there's going to be another civil war. Because once you remove the law that we are all taken, we are all saying as U.S. citizens, this is what we're going to abide by, right? That's what the U.S. Constitution says. If I declare that I am a U.S. citizen, I abide by the U.S. Constitution. The minute that U.S. Constitution is not valid for everybody, they, once you say this doesn't work, what do people do? They take up arms. It's what
Right.
they did in the American Revolution War. It's what they did in the Civil War when they said, hey, man, under this U.S. Constitution, we have states' rights. And so we want to have the right to continue to own people, right?
Yep.
Like that's
Yep.
what they were fighting for.
Yeah.
That's what they were fighting. And I don't, people want to argue, no, they were fighting for the way of the South, all this. Man,
No.
y'all can miss me with that, because the diaries and the journals of the people that lived during that time were very clear about what they were fighting for.
Yeah.
And I get it. Y'all made a lot of money not having to pay anybody. But the reality is y'all quote unquote Christians, that's not biblical either. And so we just got to be honest about the conversations that we're having and that we're having right now. And so it's we got to figure this out. And that's why I keep saying we got to hold the system accountable. We do that through voting. We do that through these lawsuits that we take to the court, and we got to continue to do these things because, listen, what I get frustrated about, even when it comes to Black history and how it's taught, the civil rights movement didn't just happen.
Yeah.
And to say it happened without talking about what happened 100 years earlier, and that's with the abolition of slavery, these were interconnected.
Yep.
Right? So you had all these people that were formerly enslaved in this country. And I say enslaved because they weren't slave, right?
Yep.
They weren't slaved. I know for a fact when I go look at the stories of my ancestors, they was running off them plantations.
That's
They were
right.
fighting. They were fighting these overseers. They were ripping. They were running. Like it took brute force to keep these folks enslaved. And so we just got to be honest about that conversation. But when these folks were finally presented with the 13th Amendment, which said that this country could no longer enslave them, what happened? They talked about 40 acres and a mule. They never got that. So there was a buildup for 100 years that led to the civil rights movement.
Right.
And the civil rights movement wasn't just a legal movement, right? It was an economic movement. And so all these things are interconnected, right? And if you look at the root of immigration and ICE and what's going on right now, it's economics. And it's about who's benefiting from these economics. And so if we're not having these conversations about how economics, civil rights, and social justice all intertwine, we're missing the entire conversation. We're truly missing what's happening right now. And we can never see the humanity of the people that are dying.
Yeah, and it goes back to, again, you dehumanize the other people, but also who is benefiting from these detention centers. You got these detention centers building. Like, who are these companies? Who are the face of these companies? Like, follow the money. Follow where is this money going, and you'll understand the situation. Because again, the ultimate factor is that America, the people that's in position, they want to keep America as this white identity. And they're going to do whatever by any means necessary to keep America that image and keep them in power.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we have to, if we're truly trying to make sure that we have a voice in this equation, if we're truly trying to make sure that we are protected in this equation. And that's what I admired so much. Because I used to wonder, man, what happened to all these plantations? What
Mm-hmm.
happened to them? During the Civil War, there was a very specific dark-hued group of people that they allowed to take up arms.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize many of our ancestors burned these plantations down themselves. They'll say it was General Sherman and all these things. I mean, he might have been the one in authority. But if you think about the ones that wanted to burn down every fabric of what
Yes.
the South meant, it was these regiments of black soldiers
Yeah.
that hated the corporation of slavery, because
Yeah.
that's what it was. It was a corporation. And so I think that we just got to be honest about these conversations. And to your point, you hit the nail on the head. It's dehumanization. When they burned those plantations down, it was their way of taking their humanity back.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that if we don't address what's happening at the root of immigration, not only is it going to rob, uh, and you said it best again, documented people of their humanity and their rights, but we also got to talk about what those documented people look like. They're
Yeah.
not just Mexican. They're not just Hispanic. They're not just from Latin America. Many of them look like us. Minneapolis has a huge Somalian population. And so we
Mm-hmm.
just got to be honest about who we're fighting for. And they've done a great job of saying immigrant means not us. And so
Yeah.
we disengage from that conversation instead of sitting back and wondering, man, who exactly is being attacked? Because, man, my daughter's school is diverse. We see everybody there, everybody. And they know. I know I heard of ICE being around one of the schools, but man, I've been real clear. Around my neighborhood, around my daughter's school, I wish y'all would pull up. I wish
Right.
y'all would pull up. Because right here in Georgia, right? And the Atlanta area to be exact, we're well more than 50 miles away from the coast. So y'all don't have jurisdiction here.
Right.
And if we got to call police on y'all, we'll do it.
Right.
If we got to make citizens arrest on y'all, we'll do it.
Right.
Because this is about ensuring that there is accountability within the law.
Right. No, and I agree too. And what I can imagine the things that's happening in like detention centers, like the one story of one ICE agent that was um uh held accountable for raping detainees in one of the centers. So it goes back to that accountability. And then also I think one of the critical things um about this conversation is, what are we willing to sacrifice? You
Mhm.
know, in this world that we're worried about making sure we're okay financially, whatever job we have, we don't want to lose that job, but to doing the right thing, what are we willing to lose? I think this is the biggest question we have to ask ourselves in the community as a whole. Like, who's willing to sacrifice their life for doing the right thing? Like, if you
Yeah.
go back to the civil rights movement, right? The civil rights movement would not be on the civil rights movement. When you talk about the civil rights movement, you can't have that conversation without high school kids,
Yeah.
the students that march, that sacrifice their bodies for the cause.
Yeah.
And if you jump in today, and I'm just putting out there, I don't want to see kids out there on the streets and stuff like that. All right, I'm just want to put it out there because you know how people take shit out of context. But going back to it is who who's willing to sacrifice for the better good for the whole. And that's the one thing I worry about. I don't see that. I
Yeah.
really don't see that.
Well, many of the demonstrations I've been at, my little girl was there.
Okay.
2020, I had her outside with me. She was 2 years old and she was outside with me. When we joined in, when they took away women's reproductive rights in Georgia, I had her outside with me. Um, and I know she may not understand everything right now. I understand that. but I want her to be able to, as she grows and matures, connect the dots of how we fight for our liberation. I think one of the things that changed the way I saw this movement was my father-in-law. Um, First black veterinarian in the state of North Carolina, March with Dr. King. There was so much work that, to your point, as a young person, he did, but he never stopped in his adult years.
Right.
Stayed with the NAACP, stayed with the civil rights organizations, stayed in these areas where they were actively holding the line for freedom, for justice, for democracy. And we've got to figure out right now who are going to be the people to hold the line. I've already made the decision that I'm going to be one of those people that hold the line. And I used to think that I grew up in the wrong time period. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
maybe I should have been born in the 60s, you know?
Mhm.
But the reality is, man, I was born in the middle of the Cold War in Frankfurt, Germany. Both my parents were in the army, right?
Right.
I was born in an environment where they were holding the line for
Right.
democracy.
Right.
And I remembered when I was getting ready to graduate high school, and I talked about maybe enlisting myself. And I remember my mother saying, no,
Mm.
I fought so you could have rights right here. Your
Mm.
father fought so that you could have rights right here. We need you fighting here.
Mm.
We need you making sure that everything that we fought for and the blood that was spilled under that flag protects y'all here.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to focus on, because we got to be honest, y'all. Like what I think about is, and you made a powerful point about sacrifice. People will lose their lives in this moment. They will. We've already seen it this week.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's difficult. People will lose their jobs. We've already seen that. But what's worse? Losing your job, losing your life, or living in the world where you don't have a voice. There are some people, and you and I probably know folks who've gone and done a long stint in prison.
Yeah.
They get behind them cold bars, and those who aren't mentally tough enough to fight,
Ooh.
my bad, I'm sorry. Somebody was blowing up trying to call in.
I don't know. You was cooking, dude. You were cooking. I don't know. I'm worried that ISIS is watching us.
Yeah, you're so silly. But no, but the people who aren't strong enough to endure the fact that they just lost all their rights, they commit suicide. They can't take it.
Right.
And so the question we got to ask ourselves is, how hard are we willing to, because they can, if we let them beat us into submission.
Yeah.
And they'll put us into that place that goes back to the first question you asked me. How's your mental?
Yeah.
They will put you in a position where your mental means nothing to you or the people around you. And the only way you see relief is by taking your own life.
Yeah.
And I know that because I've been in the system, in a corporate system, where I was so worried about this corporation and how they would respond to my voice. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How they would respond to my voice. That what? I was dying inside.
Yeah.
We can't allow them to kill our will, to kill our spirit, and to kill our resolve. We have to be able to stand into that light. And that's what I think is so important about this moment right now is us being brave enough, because that's what this comes down to, is courage.
Mm-hmm.
Man, they tell the stories about abolitionists. I mean, you know how radical it was to be called an abolitionist,
Oh
right?
my God,
You know what
yeah.
I'm saying?
That was
Like how radical.
today's version of being called a socialist and a communist.
Yeah.
That was bad.
Be
That was the
called
first word.
Yeah, to be called an abolitionist, and then to go to the Legacy Museum out there in Montgomery, Alabama, and see that the foundations of that movement were started by people in chains.
Yeah.
People who were born enslaved in this country that dared for freedom, that moved towards freedom, that wrote books in secret and mailed out to publications around the world to let them know what was happening to them here. We ain't got chains on us. Ain't nobody beat us fully into submission. When I think of what they had to throw off Do you know what type of mentality and what type of mental resolve you have to say, I might be in chains now, but my spirit is free and I'm going to fight for that freedom? To me, that's what gives me courage and what gives me resolve in this moment. And so when we talk about what we have to fight for, we got to remember the foundation that was laid before us, what they were willing to sacrifice before us.
Right.
Like when I sit back and I see them put movies out like Braveheart, and you got Mel Gibson stretched out on that table, and they say the prisoner has something to say, and he's like, freedom. It's like, man, we got to understand for generations, regardless of race, people been fighting for what? Freedom.
Yeah.
And the powers that be will always try to put you in this position of what? Oppression, because it benefits their authority. It benefits their economics. It benefits their ability to run around here and say, guess what, man? I'm the top 1% man in the world. I can have whatever woman I want. No, you can't. You had to push what? Millions of other men into a place of oppression in order for you to walk around like a king. And so what folks got to understand is when we say no kings, we're saying, no, we ain't doing that. We're not doing that. This is about all of our children having access to opportunity, having access to economics, having access to liberty. And we're going to fight for it each and every day.
Facts, brother. And then also I want to add to it too that when you said all children, not just U.S. citizen children, all children. And also the conversation we need to have too is why are families moving from other parts of the world? What are the things we're doing abroad to make them want to come over here? That is a different conversation we need to have on a global perspective. But what I want to do, I want to show you a video. The man who's behind the policy, right? And people talk about Trump, but actually the guy behind our immigration policy is Stephen Miller.
Okay.
I call him the brain. He looks like the brain from Pinky and the Brain. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to share a video he did back in 2003, I do believe. And I want your thoughts on it. Again, this is 2003. This is young Stephen Miller. You see my video? Oh, hold on a sec. Let me fix that.
It looks like it's about to come up.
Video?
Okay. Yeah.
You see it? You want to make it bigger? All right. You see it?
I see it.
All right. This is Stephen Smiller. Smiller. I'm calling him Stephen Smiller, but Stephen Miller. Let's see.
Of the should survive as possible, to kill as few people as possible. But as for Saddam Hussein and his henchmen, I think the ideal solution would be to cut off their fingers. I don't think it's necessary to kill them entirely. We're not a barbaric people. We respect life. Therefore, torture is the way to go. Because torture people can live. Torture is a celebration of life and human dignity. We need to remember that as we enter these very dark and dangerous times in the next century. And I only hope that many of my peers and people who will be leading this country will appreciate the value and respect that torture shows towards other cultures.
That is Stephen Miller, the man behind our immigration policy in 2003. Go ahead, brother. Your thoughts. And again, I want to let people know that that's not AI. That is not AI. But go ahead, brother.
So I'm going to say this. The more and more you look into the backgrounds of many of these individuals that are in power right now, you will find similar statements. You will find them. We have to realize and understand that we're fighting for our way of life. We're fighting for our rights not to be tortured. We've known for a long time torture's been a part of this equation. Whether it's behind closed doors, whether it's words that are used publicly, whether it's how we're attacked economically, they've all been methods and means of torture. And so I want to encourage folks to understand that everything that you love, everything that you hold sacred, everything that has value and meaning to you is on the table right now. It's on the table. And we have to understand that if we don't stand up in these moments because we're worried about being fired, let me tell you, if they fire you, I guarantee there's another job that will hire you because they will see value in your voice. I'm just saying. Because we're worried about losing our lives, we got to understand that there is no freedom, there is no liberty in living a life in silence and allowing things like what was just said to continue to be perpetuated.
Mm-hmm.
We have to understand that if we are truly going to win, we have to organize within our communities. We got to show up in our schools. We got to make sure that the least of us in our communities knows that we are fighting for them. Because if we don't fight for them, no one is protected. And so that's why you keep hearing me say all children. That's why when I get calls about incidents happening involving ICE at different schools, I'm showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Because of listen, if those babies aren't protected, my baby ain't protected.
That's right.
And I'm not turning my baby over to the system because I feel superior to another group of people. We got to put this stuff behind it, y'all. They've created these artificial categories that have enabled people to feel superior.
Yep.
When if you look at us as people, 97% of what's in me is in Ishmael,
Yep.
is in Renee Good. The 3% that's different might be dreads, might be a beard, might be a change of pigmentation, but to the core, we are all the same. And if we don't fight for that unity, if we don't ensure that we are lifting up that unity, we're going to be dealing with more and more Stephen Millers.
Facts.
And that's just the reality.
No, facts. And then also on top of that, you know, I watched the video numerous times already. I think from this conversation, I want people to understand, listen to his words, but listen to the people in the background that's laughing.
Mm-hmm.
These are the people that believes in that ideology.
Yeah.
Those are the people that you may not see. Those are the people that you may work with. Those are people that's probably walking down the street. Those are the people that when you go to a grocery shop, you may not know that they believe the same thing as he do. And so this goes back to my common thought in the beginning. You know, rights is something you constantly fight for every day. It's something you can't just notch a lot and be like, yeah, I'm a citizen and it's given to me by law. Because laws can change.
Yeah.
Right? You know, there was a time in history that being black and educated, you were a threat and you were dead.
Yep.
That was law. So some laws don't make sense, but it was the law at that time.
Yeah.
And so again, I want people to understand that we have to keep on fighting. We have to resist. We have to educate. We got to inform people. And sometimes some people are lost cause.
Yeah.
You have to give up on them and let them find out for themselves. Brother, I'm gonna let you finish it because I know you're like striking the beard a little bit. Like you
well, you got me thinking. You got me thinking. You be over here dropping little stuff and you get me thinking. So check this, right? How much of the population do you think we need to change laws?
I think when it comes to population wise, I think we need when it comes to race groups, I think we need a certain percentage of white women
Mhm.
because white women turns the entire election.
But
'Cause if
so
you look at like the election that happened with Trump, most white women, majority of white women voted for Trump. And a lot of those white women supported because they supported that patriotic system.
yeah,
They feel comfortable and stable in that system.
yeah. So my bad. I probably should have been a little. Well,
No,
I
no,
should
no,
have
no,
been
no.
clear
Go ahead,
on
go
it.
ahead. Go
So
ahead.
in my election, how much of the eligible group of voters do you think voted? The number numerically.
Who voted? I would probably say like 20%.
Bam. Right. 20%. 20% of the city. 20%. Right. Now he got a much larger pie, right, of that
Right.
20% than I did. But that group is going to dictate the agenda for this city for the next 4 years.
You're right. Wow.
So all we got to find out is who is our 20%.
Yeah.
The presidential elections, they peaked, they probably at about 30%, right? So nationally, so this whole conversation about this is what a majority of the world, this ain't what a majority of the world wants. This ain't what a majority of the country wants. It's those who have had access to the pillars of power for centuries understand that if we don't show up in our small numbers, because they're small numbers, and make sure that our numbers are greater than theirs, man, we might lose everything that we hold dear.
Facts.
Meanwhile, we truly are on this side losing everything that we hold dear. And so what we got to do is just continue to build numbers. That's it. We just got to continue to build. We got to figure out who is going to be our 20%.
Yeah.
That's so baffling to me because we got 80% of the voters in the city that I ran on, they're registered to vote. So we know registration is not an issue. It's
Right.
resignation.
Right.
How do we go into that 80% to add to this number to ensure that we get the turnout necessary?
I think one of the things is educating people how government works
Yep.
on the federal, on the lower, on local level, state level,
Yeah.
and the federal level, and how they work hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, how what this administration is doing is illegal of holding funds when it comes to money to daycare centers in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
It's like you can't do that. And then also on top of that, I thought Congress was the people to approve the person in charge of the IRS. So
Mm-hmm.
just recently, I don't know if you heard that the president say, "Oh, we just put someone in power in charge of the IRS." Knowing, understanding how government works, they have to get approval through Congress. A
Yep.
president can't just put someone in power.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that understanding how the pillars of government works,
Yeah.
so how funding works, and then also how census work as well too. It's like understanding like certain populations and why you're not getting funding and things like that. That plays a role into it as well. It's like
Yeah.
everything kind of works hand in hand together, but try to Sesame Street it for people to understand. All right, you have to know these are the things you have to know. So anytime
Yeah.
you have a situation where not situation when you have a local meeting, motherfucker, go to those local meetings.
Yeah.
Understand what your local leaders are doing.
Yeah. I mean, school board, everything, right? To your point, so there are three pillars where we get change, right? Three
Mhm.
pillars. It's the president, the governors, the mayors. Those are your three. The Congress folks and all these things.
Mhm.
So they were so intelligent with how they designed this system of democracy. And I want to be clear for everybody that's here. democracy only works for the majority. I want to say this again. Democracy only works for the majority.
Yep.
So if you cannot organize a majority of the vote, you do not participate in democracy.
Yep.
Because the agenda is set by the president. What did they do with the president? They made sure that the president had the courts. What did they do? What else did they do? They made sure that he had Congress. They made sure that he had what? The House, right? The representatives, the House. They made sure the senators. They made sure that he had all these people. Why? Because if he sets the agenda, and then he has legislators who are willing to write laws that fit his agenda, and then you have judges who are willing to defend the laws written for your agenda, right? You have enshrined, which is why you're hearing so many folks say this is fascism. And they're right. It is fascism. But they did it in a way where they took every lever of power to ensure that there's no blockade. We sent Obama there as president, but we didn't have legislators to enforce his agenda. And so when we start looking at this system and who we're going to put in as our executive, our CEO, chief executive officer, whether, the president, the governor, we got to make sure that they've got what? Legislators who are also advocating on their behalf, because that's how they're winning. They're winning because while we we just got the president, he finna sign executive orders. We're good. Well, what happens is he starts signing executive orders, and then which legislators start to challenge those executive orders? And because they have the numbers, again, this is why I say democracy works for the majority. They have enough numbers to where they can come together and put him what? Put him on trial in a sense for the executive order he just signed. And they can go back and forth about why that executive order needs to be pulled, and they can call it up for a vote because, again, they have the numbers. And so we just got to understand the game that's being played, because if we don't understand the avenues, if we don't understand it's not enough to elect a Democratic governor of Georgia and Florida, and they don't have the majority of Democrats in state legislative roles, man, we in for a world of trouble. And that's what we're in right now.
Facts. And I think the one thing you forgot too is the judicial side. For decades, they were working on making sure they have judges in different states that had their same agenda at heart. And you can see that in the Supreme Court.
You can. And that's what we got to fight for, man. And that's what we got to, in this course of having these conversations. Because, again, they've got so many different groups of government. When I say groups, I mean school board, right? So when we talk about why is this book being banned? Well, the body that governs how our children are educated decided, we don't need this, we don't need this, we don't need this. And so we got to understand that it's not enough to just say we got the mayor and we got the chair of the county commission. No, we got to take the school board. And then if we're honest, right, even to that very micro level, it's who is your HOA president? Who is your and in our apartment communities, who is organizing, having HOA type groups within those apartments to ensure that folks are getting the information, to ensure that folks are engaged in this process. And there's just so much from an organization standpoint that we have to do. And it's a lot of work, but it also shows just why community is so important.
And I agree with you 100%. And this has been a great conversation because, again, with this kind of conversation I wanted to have, I didn't want to separate documented and citizen American from this conversation. So hopefully when you listen to what we were talking about, that the one thing you got from this conversation is there's no difference between the two.
Nope, not at all.
Humanity. So brother, what's next in your future?
Man, I was really excited about the fact that I was able to participate in academic research. For folks that don't know, I run a communications firm. And so I was the one who put together the communication strategy for the attorneys that were representing the young girls in the R. Kelly case. Put together the communication strategy for the attorneys representing the family of Ahmaud Arbery. So there have been a lot of things that we've been doing, and in some of these cases, like Ahmaud Arbery, we're able to raise so much awareness that we got laws changed. Right? It's messaging, it's people in the street, it's leveraging all these things to get laws changed. And so I was able to join 50 other authors to really talk about what true reconciliation in this country looks like. And I was speaking on it from a communication standpoint. So we got the book that's coming out on January 23rd. It's going to be on college campuses worldwide. So I'm really excited about that because again, when you talk about getting these young folks involved, I really believe we gotta make sure that they understand it when they step into this arena, how to win in this arena. And so I wrote a chapter in there, not a long chapter. I wanted to keep it real simple, right? So that it's easy to read, easy to pick up on, and we'll probably be getting out and doing some speaking on that. But I just want to make sure that people are equipped, because in this book, again, we have 55 authors, right? We're talking about everything from civil rights to what's happening with ICE. We're talking about making sure that you know the law, how to get activated once you know the law, and how to push for not just change, right, in our communities, and not just nationally, but internationally, because we're not just a land of laws. We're a world of laws, and making sure that we've got a voice at every stage of that game.
And facts, man. If you have that information, definitely send it to me because that link will be in the description below. So if
Okay.
anyone want information on that book and how they can get that book, brother, I appreciate you for coming on. Thank you for your time. I know this was like something, I thought up at like a certain time in the morning, and I reached
Yeah.
out to you and you were down with doing that. So I appreciate you. So how can people find you?
Man, y'all can hit me up. I'm Dontaye Carter. The spelling's on the screen on every platform. We're everywhere. Substack, TikTok, Threads, and it's just important for me to just make sure because social media very much like Ishmael and I connected. It's just an ongoing conversation, and as we grow, as we mature, we evolve. I'm pretty sure we're gonna have another conversation about this,
Yes. Yes.
and the maturity, right, and how we have that conversation, how we talk about the legal part. It's going to be there's going to be so much depth to it. So y'all just please stay engaged, please stay involved. Send me a DM, I check request as well, and yeah, let's make it happen.
Definitely. All right, bro. I appreciate you so much.
I
Have a
appreciate you
great
too.
time with your daughter, and I will talk to you soon, bro.
Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you.
All right.
Peace.